terrible story of two people where one disliked, which is a light word, he hated the other person. So much so, in fact, that when he was approached by this old, wise, saintly looking person and said that God wishes you to give you a blessing of anything that you want. But just remember, that person that you hate so much, whatever you wish for yourself, that person will get twice what you are receiving. So the man began to think, and he was torn between being able to receive the blessing for whatever he possibly could want in life, but knowing that his enemy would receive twice the amount. After much pondering, he looked at the saintly man, and in these words he said, "Then ask God to blind me in one eye." Can you imagine hatred so deep and intense that you're willing to harm yourself so that your enemy should have it even worse? This week's Torah portion is really the beginning of all anti-Semitism. It's the story of the Egyptians and the Jews, and how the Egyptians began to enslave the Jews and to really torment them and made them suffer and did terrible physical abuse to them because they were afraid that they would take something that belongs to them. And so they made them feel like gerim, like aliens, like they didn't belong. And so finally the Jews were saved by Moses and God and redeemed from the land of Egypt and were brought to their own homeland. And interestingly enough, the famous classic commentator Rashi tells us that when the Egyptian hierarchy began to worry about the Jewish nation and its rapid growth, two things were bothering them. On the one hand, they said, what happens if they're too numerous and they overpower us and they leave on their own? This land will be drained of this human resource. On the other hand, they were afraid that if they became too powerful, maybe they would overtake the country itself. They weren't happy just having all the contributions that the Jewish nation were offering these people. And yet we're torn between the wonderful contributions, but their dislike for them. And even when Jews came finally to their own homeland, that sense that maybe they don't belong there, that sense that maybe they are just simply gerim, aliens that don't have a right to the land, that same mentality that they had in Egypt is trying to be imposed upon us by the nations of the world, even once we leave all their lands, only to go into our land. And their dislike for us is so intense that they'd rather harm themselves than give the opportunity for the Jewish nation to have some serenity, peace, and their own little piece of land. That is hatred. Hatred is not logical. It's not fair. And it even will come at a price of hurting their own just to see the enemy destroyed. So, as a Jewish nation, we have to remember, don't ever feel like gerim again. Don't ever feel that you don't belong. Because the minute that you begin to feel that, no matter which country that you live in, is the beginning that you already are allowing your enemies and foe to get under your skin and into your head and to become apologetic. Don't be apologetic for the land of Israel, and don't be apologetic for any place where you live, because ultimately Jews have always been contributors, givers, not takers. Have a great Shabbos.